Hi, welcome back. I'm Chris Ellery. I'm a reporter in southeastern Pennsylvania, and if you're watching, this is the third video now in a tutorial series that I've taken to calling Python in the Newsroom, and I am just trying to teach some basic coding skills for reporters to use to analyze big data in the newsroom. And right now we're just in the introduction. This is the third video here. And what we're going to be doing right now, we've already installed Python and the code compiler, so you should have all that ready to go. And I'm going to walk you through how to make a virtual environment so you don't end up screwing up anything on your hard drive, as well as our I think the best way to describe it is a working environment. I like to do things in Jupyter Notebook, and I'll go over more of the specifics why, both in this video and as things go on. And then we're going to import a few libraries, and then I'm going to import a table very quickly just to give you some basic overview. Okay, so this is my little Google Doc to tell me what I'm doing next. We're going to install a virtual environment onto our computer now, and this is going to be different if you've never worked with code before, if you've never worked with Python before. Installing these, libraries, these packages, these modules, they work a little bit differently than you would installing a program. So we aren't actually going to go to anybody's website this time. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to open up our command prompt, which I already have running here. And that's, see here, if you hit start and search CMD on Windows, it'll come up. This is your terminal if you're using a Mac. I'm using Windows. And let's go ahead and how this works is you'll use what's called pip, P-I-P. It is Python's installer. And for this one, the first couple of things that we're going to do, I already have them up and installed in my computer, so I'm not going to have the same thing that you guys will. But let's start with the virtual environment. So you always type pip space install, and the package for virtual environment is virtualenv, virtual env. Hit enter. And for you, it's going to, if you don't have it installed, it's going to go through a little process there. It's very brief, and it'll, once it's finished, it'll go back to the command line prompt with the little blinking, cursor at the bottom. For me, if you already do have it installed, you'll see it says requirement already satisfied, and that's fine. The next thing that we want to install is Jupyter Notebook. Now this is, I'll get into why I like using this later, but essentially it is our working environment for what we're going to be doing. So I like to just do pip install Jupyter. And that's another thing here with a lot of Python modules. If there's a chance to change PI into PY as a little pun, they will do it. It will, usually Python modules have that PY somewhere in there, somewhere. So same thing here, just enter, and I already have it installed. There we go. There's a lot of dependencies that it's checking to make sure. At least I believe that's what it's doing. I should say, again, not an expert, just what I'm able to put together. Okay, so once that's installed, we're going to install our library, our pandas library. And again, I'm going to have it already installed, so install pandas. This is a library that allows you to work with tabular data. Basically, you're probably already very familiar with Excel or OpenOffice, Apache's spreadsheet program, and it lets you work with data in many of the same ways. And I'll get into why I like to do things with Python rather than in Excel later. But for now, we have the pandas installed. Oh, yes. And for what I'm going to be doing, our first table, I actually tried to do this before I started recording, and it wouldn't let me do it because I didn't have the module installed. Library. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to install a package called lxml. I tried to load this table, the table I'm going to be loading later on in this video before, and I needed this package. I didn't have it, so I already went ahead and did it, but it was pip install lxml. Okay, so that's installed. Now we're going to actually make a virtual environment and start doing something useful. We're gonna import a table from a website, and we're going to view the data. So the first thing, before you start doing any project, you're always going to, the first thing is to make a virtual environment, a directory for it. So what you're going to do here is, let's actually make a directory, mk dir. This is how you do it in Windows. I forget how to do it in Mac. I'm sorry. This is the same thing as going to your desktop and right-click and create a new folder at this point, so you could do that too. But let's make a directory, python -in the newsroom. And I'm going to make the directory here, and that's made. Now I'm going to change directory, so I want to work out of that folder. So cd python, and you can actually just hit tab and it'll autofill in. I think that's because of the code compiler, but I'm not sure. Okay, so we've changed directories to Python in the newsroom. And the next thing we want to do is we want to make the virtual environment we'll be working in right now. This is where, if you want to start a new project, a specific story-related project, you would make your virtual environment, and then we'll go forward. So for this one, let's just make the virtual environment first. It is virtual. Nope. There we go. Spell it right. Virtual env, just like you did with the pip install, but just virtual env space, and then the name of what the directory will be. Let's say first table read. That's what we'll be doing. First table read. Hit enter. And this is the process. It's going to take a few seconds here to set up the virtual environment and create it. So just be a minute, and we'll wait for it to do its thing. While we're waiting on that, I did just also want to mention a good thing. Something I like to do is actually use graphing notebooks. I like to have those handy. They're pretty cheap. Just graphing paper is really the key thing here. If I'm at work working on something else that has nothing to do with data, and I might have a thought, like, I wonder if this code will work. I prefer the graphing paper because you can actually write down the code just in your head, and indenting tends to be an issue, so it helps with that. It helps keep things organized. But looks like we are done setting up the virtual environment. So now we need to go into that directory that we just created. So cd, and what did I call it? First table read. There we go. So now we're in first table read. The virtual environment isn't active yet, though. What we need to do is change the directory. So cd scripts. Now we're in the scripts folder. And now you can just type out activate or ACT and then tab to autocomplete, hit enter. Now it's activated. Now we have to go back. You don't want to start working from here because you're in the scripts directory, and it won't hurt anything really, but it will kind of screw you up. I did this the first time I was learning, and I was missing some files. I thought that I had put them someplace else, and they were in the script folder. So we're going to go back. I'm sorry, to go back, that was cd, excuse me. To go back, that was cd dot, and that just takes you back, to the directory you were at before. Okay, so now we're ready to load the Jupyter Notebook. And that is JUPYTER space NOTEBOOK. And hit enter. All right, so I had a little computer issue, and as I was trying to edit this video, I realized that I got so screwed up that I forgot how to show you how to make a notebook by the time I got through it all. So just real quick, this video is going to get a little bit weird, but once your Jupyter Notebook loads in a new tab on your browser, you'll go to the New button over here, hit the Python 3, and it'll open up a new notebook in here. And this is the end result, but we'll get back to the video in continuity now. Okay, so we've imported pandas and we are now ready to read in some kind of data. I wanted to use this website here. I live in, like I said, southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I have here a list on the county website of the millage rates for each town. As you can see, it has the 2018 borough township millage rate, the school district millage rate, which will change in June, and then the total millage rate. That's actually not including, or wait, is it? Oh yeah, okay, yeah. That's including the 24.45 total county millage rate there. Excuse me. And what we want to do, there's a couple ways we could do this. We could copy and paste all that data and then throw it into a spreadsheet and hope that it parses it correctly. We could download the PDF at the link available above, and then we could just use that as a reference. But if you wanted to use this data in a chart and you want to do it quickly, both of those are going to be difficult options. If there's a problem with the PDF and you just can't copy and paste it over, you're going to run into that issue. It's going to be a by hand issue. If you copy and paste the data directly from here, there may be some formatting problems, and it just might be more of a hassle than it needs to be. It's not for something like this. We only have 54 towns in Bucks County, so it's not going to be a huge chore, but I think you can see how in another situation that you need a table pulled off of a website, how it could be difficult. How those formatting issues could only get worse with the more data that you have. So in pandas, what we would do is we want to read the website itself. Let me copy this here. And with Python in general, everything works well by assigning variables to things. So that you can call that information later. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out the line here. Now that means nothing to us right now. If I hit that, it doesn't know what to do with this information. It means nothing to pandas. So we have to save it as a variable. And to do that, I'm going to save it as URL equals, and this still isn't going to work, and I'll show you why here. I'll show you that it doesn't work first. So we want URL, and I'm going to space this now. You don't have to, but it does tend to make it easier to read. Whenever it's looking at this, it's trying to read this as a line of code, and it doesn't. That's not what this is. This is a string. A string is any collection of letters, symbols that are not numbers, things that can't be quantified, I think is the best way to describe it. So in order to make sure that it reads it as a string, we need to put quotations or apostrophes around it. I'm going to just do the double quotes here. And now it's going to save the website address as a variable. And that variable is URL. So when we do that, that's our output. I'm hitting Shift Enter, by the way, in case I haven't said that before already. That runs the code and then brings up a new line. So now we need to take the URL and we need to make it something that pandas can read. Of course, to do this, what we're going to need, I'm going to assign a variable second and just run this first. pd.read, and there's a lot of options for read. If you hit tab, it'll show you all the things that can be read. And if we were reading a CSV off of the hard drive, then that's what I would do. I would do read CSV, read Excel. And I'll do those examples in another video, of course, but for this one, what we want to do is actually read HTML, and this is where we call the read HTML function requires what would be called an argument, I guess a keyword argument maybe, but in this case, we want it to read the URL. Okay, so that's kind of messy. But what it did was it looked for a table to read. And that is what we have. That's all of the tables that are in this URL. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit messy, but we can actually clean this up. We don't want to save this as our variable, but what we can do is, first off, since we're reading multiple tables, we don't want, okay, so I just want to mention I did have to edit this video a little bit because I screwed up, I stumbled over my own words again, and I did run a line of code there, so that's why this looks like 5, 4, 5, and 7 right now. So what we have here is I ran pd read HTML and then the URL, and what we have is a collection of tables. So we want to actually, first off, since this is all screwy, it looks weird right now, and we'll leave that just as, but we're going to assign it a variable. So I'm going to call it the tables. In space just so it's easier to read, so we will save the tables in the URL, and that should basically give us the same thing. Yeah, but we don't want to print out all of this information, and a nice little thing to remember here is that along here we have the index of lines in each table, and you'll notice we have a 0, and then a 0, then a 0, then a 0, and then a 1. Well, the tables I know start at 0. So that means we're looking for a specific table. We don't want this information. We just want this one. And I'm not sure about these two. I already know what number I need, but I'm going to show you something interesting. So we want to call up the tables, a specific table. We'll use that. We'll use the brackets to call the table. Let's see what happens when we hit 0. It's looking like something better. That's not the one we want. Nope. Oh, there's that one with the county data. Okay, here's the one we want, but there's an issue. We'll see up here, the column headers are not really what we want. The column headers are here in this first row, row 0. So let's go back here. That's the table that we want. So let's save this as our first data frame. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let's not do that. Let's figure something out first. How do we get that to read differently? We now know the table that we want, and we know that we're going to have to save that as a variable. But what if, whenever we read in these things, we go ahead and just assign the header row? Header, by the way, yes, of course, right. URL, that's your argument, your keyword, your URL that you're reading. That's this variable up here. And then, after your argument, the table read, you're going to give it a condition of the header will be row 0. There we go. Now we've got this unnamed column here, and it's a little bit messy, but we will also, if you scroll down all the way, we have this one row of just nan values. So we also want to get rid of that row. So how do we do that? Well, first things first, let's say this is data frame 1, df1 equals tables index 3. There we go. So how do we get rid of that extra row and the extra column? Well, we want to run another function of pandas called drop, and then we're going to open parentheses. We're actually going to run this twice. I tried to do it all in one single run through, and I couldn't get it to work earlier, so I don't know why. But let's anyone double check my notes over here. Ah, yes, right. Okay, so let me go ahead and copy and paste because I do have this saved from earlier. Just be a second. Okay, so here's what we have. Our data frame, our object, drop with the open parenthesis, that's the start of our function. Our columns that we're going to do, columns equals, and then we're going to do the open curly bracket, and then apostrophes and quotation marks do the same job, There's a reason. There are certain reasons why you want to use one over the other, but I can get into that later. Right now, either one is fine. So I use the apostrophes here, and the column name was unnamed, colon, and then a space, and the number 0. Then close curly brackets, close parentheses, period, and then call another function, another drop function, and we did row 54 because that was the row that is all nan. So, run that. Let me hit this. Oh, yeah, okay, right. Oh, shoot, I collapsed it. There we go. All right, so now we scroll down, and look at that. It's all nice and neat. We only have these columns here. We are right where we want to be, but we didn't save that as a variable that time. So we need to go up, and we just want to overwrite our original df1 now, because this is the variable we want. You can save it as another variable if you want to. Sometimes that is a good idea if you're going to be making a lot of changes and you aren't sure if they're going to work or not. But for the most part, this should be fine. There we go. So now we have our data frame, and I want to go ahead and go over a few real basic things in pandas. Now that we've read in this data frame, what kind of information, what can we do with this immediately with pandas? And I don't want to go too in depth, but let's just try a few things real quick. First things first, every time I read in a table, I always do the data frame, the object, .info in parentheses. And I get a basic idea of what I'm looking at here. We can see here, these are the column names. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to do, okay. We have the column names here, and I did just realize, excuse me, that we actually are going to need to change our column titles to do anything with the data right now. Pandas doesn't read column headers that have spaces, and even certain other punctuation will screw that up. I think that we're fine with those forward slashes right now, but we are going to have to get rid of the spaces. So let's go ahead and take care of that now. df1.columns. Hit enter right now, shift enter. You will get a list of column names. And the easiest way that we can replace all of those is just to do replace quotation marks underscore, and that's what we, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, replace quotation marks space. That's what we want to replace, our space, comma, and this is, we're going to replace it with an underscore. Because we don't want them to be strung together as one big long word, but we do want to get rid of the spaces there. And just in case there's any white space on either side of the column headers, we're going to go dot and strip. And that should work fine. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. str. These are string functions. We are changing the string of things. So, yep. Okay, we can already see there. But we didn't save it. To save this one, all we're going to do is we're going to do df1.columns space equals space. So now we're assigning the column names to our string, you know, replace and then strip. And now df1, there we go. Okay, so we had the info there. We saw up top here that we have 54 non-null objects, 53 school mill, total millage. The reason why there's only 53 non-null and 54 here is because we have one guy here, Telford Borough. It goes between two different counties, so their tax information, we have a municipal rate, but the school district and the county taxes are Montgomery and a school district not in Bucks County, so these are NAN. Let me go ahead and click this so we can minimize that a little bit. So what can we do with this? Well, one thing that is in here, let me see if this will work real quick. F1, let's do, total millage, I guess. Okay, there we go. That just prints off all the total millage. But for pandas, there's a bunch of functions that we can call to actually do stuff with the data. Let's see here. One thing that we can do whenever we call a function, or whenever we call a column up, and we want to know some things about the column, just a quick review of data, we can do describe. Describe. There we go. So we know that there are 53 rows here from the count, 53 different entries. The mean is of total millage in the county is 177.28222. Yeah. The standard deviation, the STD, from the mean is 36.83 in either direction. The minimum is 15 mils, so that's the lowest apparently. Which, wait a minute, total millage. Hold on a second. Oh, that's interesting. We might have an error in this data, and that's why we do these things. I don't know why Regalsville only has that. Maybe they're exempt from the county. I'm not sure. It's not a very large borough. It's not a very wealthy borough, so that could be the case here. So we are going to leave that alone for now. But now we know that there's a low one of 15 mils. Everyone else is 160 at least or above. The highest is 278, which I think that's Bristol. Excuse me, 278? 268? Where's our 278? Where the hell are you? Wait a minute. 278. Morrisville Borough. Okay, there we go. There's the other one. There we go. Anyway, there's somewhere. No, wait. Why didn't... No, there we go. Okay. All right. Anyway, then we have, as the breakdown there, like I was reading off there, 25%, 50%, 75th percent within the percentile groups. So we have that very basic thing. If you wanted the mean, if you wanted the median and not the mean, it's still in there, you can just do df1 total millage dot mean, median. There we go. The median is 169.94, and the median was going to work a little bit better than the average here. And I think that we saw a little bit of why with that 15 mils. Only one borough comes in, and that shouldn't be included. But also, there's only a few that are above 200. I think maybe a handful. But anyway, that's some very basic things you can do with pandas. And the next video I do, probably tomorrow, is just, I'm going to start doing a little project for fun. And we'll call some other information. Anyway, I hope you found this informative. Thank you very much for watching. And please, any questions or comments, just leave them in the comment section below.